Life Audio.
When I was disordered, the way my eating looked was, well, try not to eat until like 11:30, have my super healthy smoothie, right, with collagen and spinach and all the things, right? And then try not to eat and then eat like a lot of handfuls of chocolate things or whatever I could get my hand on because I was so like ravenously hungry, and then eat like super healthy dinner, gluten-free, dairy-free, all the things, right? But
Mhm.
then again, irrationally like hungry in the evening. And so
Yeah.
handfuls of chocolate things. And then, the dilemma of don't buy the chocolate things anymore. And then you won't eat handfuls of chocolate things, but
Mhm.
then eating handfuls of all the other things because they weren't chocolate things. And then, like maybe I can find some chocolate things in the kids' room, or like I can pick them out of the trail mix or something. I don't like desperation for the chocolate things. Right. And so
Yes.
it's strange because I feel like in my disordered life,
Mhm.
I think I actually consumed more sugar and
Yeah.
and stuff that wasn't as good for me. And yet I'm more
Mhm.
afraid now because I'm not on a plan.
Oh, friend, did I just tell your story? Okay, that's mine. Are you scared without a plan? Is it hard for you to believe you can be healthy without being on a plan? If so, I get it. And that's the conversation I'm continuing today with my good friend Amy Carlson, who is a dietitian. She is an eating disorder expert. She's been practicing for, I think, 27 ish years. She knows her stuff. And today she's going to help us sort through food issues. If you didn't listen to the first part, go back, listen to that when we were talking about agency around our food choices. Today we continue that conversation, but at the end, oh friend, at the end, we answer the question that comes up most the end of October, which is what do I do about all the candy? How do I relate to the candy in a healthy way? Oh, stick around because you're going to want to hear that. Hey, we're glad you're here. Go to improvedbodyimage.com and learn more if this is your first time on the show. Welcome to Compared to Who, the podcast to help you make peace with your body so you can savor God's rest and feel His love. If you're tired of fighting body image the world's way, Compared to Who is the show for you. You've likely heard lots of talk about loving your body, but my goal is different. Striving to fall in love with stretch marks and cellulite is a little silly to me. Instead, I want to encourage you and remind you with the truth of Scripture that you are seen, you are known, and you are loved no matter what your size or shape. Here, the pressure is off. If you're looking for real talk, biblical encouragement, and regular reminders that God loves you and you're not alone, you've come to the right place. I hope you enjoy today's show, and hey, tell a friend about it. But I know, Amy, when someone's listening to you, they are thinking, and they wouldn't maybe articulate it this way. So I'm summarizing, but food
Okay.
is scary. Food is dangerous. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't watch it. So I shared this with you earlier this week. So my son's a freshman. One of my sons is a freshman, and he's in biology. And I love his biology teacher so much. I don't think
Yeah.
she listens to my podcast either. So I hope I'm safe here.
Yeah. You're
But
safe.
she told them about like good foods and bad foods, and
Mhm.
how important it is to eat clean,
Oof.
and how if you don't eat clean, you are gunking up your system. And
Oh,
she
darn.
explained the biology behind that. And so it was presented as like scientific fact. And so my 14-year-old son
Yeah.
comes home and he's like, I have to eat clean. Otherwise, I'm gunking up my system. I'm like, I'm like, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And oh, by the way, you're 14.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
like, of
Mhm.
course, we want you to eat
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables and meat.
Mhm.
And, we
Mhm.
want you to eat good things. And he does. He's never fought us on that. But
Yeah.
you do not have to be afraid of Cheez It.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
they're not gunking up your system
Yeah.
in a way where
Yeah.
it's like he's essentially like, I eat this and then I'm going to turn 40 and I'm going to have all these diseases because I gunked up my system. Right? And then similarly, I've
Darn.
noticed with my athletes,
Mhm.
right? It used to be when they were younger, we really made sure that they had Gatorade or some sorts of sports
Mm-hmm.
drink. I know there's much fancier,
Mm-hmm.
maybe better balanced drinks than Gatorade
Right.
now. Like I know the coconut juice ones are better. But back in the day, before we had Prime and all the things, you know, we had to get him, especially Gatorade, at
Mm-hmm.
halftime because he could not play a soccer game for an hour without
Yeah.
running out of steam. And the second half of the game, we would just watch him fall and get tripped and cry and do all of these
Yeah.
things where it was like, oh, this is a blood sugar problem. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's out of
Mm-hmm.
steam. So
Mm-hmm.
we get him something he can take at halftime and,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then he
Yeah.
then he do just fine, right? And it was a forced issue. But now I'm watching like these athletes, they are getting their nutrition information, maybe from teachers, but also from influencers. And
Mm-hmm.
so sugar is bad. You don't want to drink
Mm-hmm.
sugar. Like, why would I want sugar? Sugar is going to make me fat. And so even though they are, I mean, I've got a kid that plays football, right? He
Eat
eats
so many
he
calories.
eats a meal at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And does not do what a professional player does in like eating a huge,
Yeah.
2000 calorie dinner the night
Yeah.
before. They're not pros. And so I know that he's had not sufficient calories by the time he eats that 4 o'clock meal. And then he goes and plays a 3 hour game. And
Wow.
I'm watching the team fade and I'm saying it's because they don't have
Yeah.
enough
They're hungry
food.
guys. They're hungry
Right.
guys.
And so it's so I guess my question is, I think there's a lot of fear that it's fear mongering, right? But like there's a
Yeah.
lot of fear around food. Like to have that kind of like attitude where it's like, oh, I can just savor food and food is a
Yeah.
cultural treat. It's like, but no, food is scary. And
Mm-hmm.
like, and if you don't think that food is scary, I mean, here's the brass tacks, Amy. If you don't think food is scary, it's because you're dumb and you don't know better. Right? Like, I mean, that's the attitude, right? You
Yeah.
just, oh, mom, you just don't know that if I eat clean, it's better. Like, I
Yeah.
understand that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. Like, so how do you respond to that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've got a teenager that I love and adore that is smarter than me too. Um, I think they're all smarter than me. All four of my kids are smarter than me, but and in this area often. Uh, and he is smart, actually. He really probably is smarter than me in all the things. But here's part of it. One, I used to say to those little baseball players when they were little, I'd be like, somebody go get them a bag of Skittles. Those
Mhm.
boys need a bag of Skittles and then they'll hit one out of the park. And they would. I literally would go to the concession stand and be like, here, eat this Sour Patch string, whatever, because what you need is sugar right now. You're
Right,
tanking and you need sugar.
right.
I'm sure I would get looked at with funny, right? But I'm like, those kids need a bag of Skittles. Um, what's interesting to me, I have a very, I've got, several careers in my head going. And one of my passions is to get into the school system and curriculum and to say, hey, we just got it all wrong. We have it backwards, right?
Mhm.
We're working our way backwards from disease state.
Mhm.
So we're working our way backwards from a disease state, and then now we're telling our children, hey, this is how you need to eat, rather than teaching them how to love food and cook,
Mhm.
and that these foods aren't weird, and so that the Skittles are whenever, okay, that's great, I would eat those because I'm tanking, but I'm not, those aren't like part of my lunch every day because I wouldn't even think of that, right? Because I
Mhm.
know how to cook and make food. And so we're just going at it wrong. Part of why it's scary is because at this nutrition conference, there's just brilliant researchers from the University of Minnesota, my alma mater, and she gave an example. She pulled a study up of microbiome study, and that is her life's work. The three of them that were speaking, that's their life work. PhDs, smarty in the lab, everything. And she took this art and went back to the summary and one line. And she said, how many of you have actually used this line in your career, right? Like as advice. And she said it came from this one line. And I know this is
Mhm.
true. I've said it before in podcasts. that research is combed for a tagline, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And if then we can create sort of a nutrition sort of philosophy around that, and then build out sort of like, oh my goodness, right? And it's not that, this one particular thing was bad. It's like, obviously, and end result, eat more fruits and vegetables, great. But it's to say that so much of what we're saying is built off of momentum. So even the idea of eating clean, it's like, okay, biology teacher, can you unpack that for me? Just unpack that for me, what that means. It means eating like you and I ate as kids, right? I mean, just a bunch of normal food and throw some, right, potato chips in there, Dutch baby, whatever Dutch, potato chips. And right.
I'm from the East Coast. We had Utz.
Oh, Utz.
Yeah.
Utz. I'm from the North. I think we had that big can,
Oh yeah. Well,
like,
Utz came in a can too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I bet it was probably the same, right? Just like the big can. They were so good, by the way. I feel like my mom used those cans to store toys in, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you couldn't throw the can away. You saved the can.
Ever.
So
Saved
and then whatever is in it smelled like chips forever.
For a very long time. Yes. Right. So if you asked a biology teacher, hey, just unpack what that means for me, for you, like, what does that mean? Well, did we have to give a label to eating which is just natural eating, right? It is natural to eat fruits and vegetables. It's natural to have protein and carbohydrate. It's, yes, the idea of, there was sort of a window of time where we ate a lot of what we would call processed foods that came off of a factory conveyor belt. That's diminished substantially. But that is, again, the idea of, yeah, okay, we need to eat more real foods. Let's just say that, like, whole real foods. But she was explaining and did a great job. And she was talking about the big buzzword is microbiome, as you know. And she was saying, this is my life's work. I've dedicated my whole life to this, and I'm barely beginning to understand.
Yeah.
What does that tell us, right?
Yeah.
That when it gets distilled down, it's kind of like fashion, right? Like the big fashion show, and then eventually it makes it into the Target line. Like, was that the version that was original? Like, what is that? By the time we're repeating things, wow, it's a distilled version of, and it was such a humble approach. I was so grateful for the language she used to say, I'm barely beginning to understand it. It's so complex. She said, do you understand all the different things that go into what affects our microbiome? The environment, where we live, geography, history, hereditary, where we, yes, vaginal delivery, C-section, like, and so
he did learn that. He did learn that because he was a C-section baby.
Okay, there you go.
That was part of the biology lesson.
That was okay. That's interesting.
Had to be more careful.
No, so it's interesting, right? So her point was, be careful the language that you use, right? Be careful what you're distilling down, and have a good understanding. Not only that, I want you to think, and this is so important for us, as going back to the idea of agency. I wonder the last time, and I would love for people to just flood your email box with praise reports about really great doctors, because I know that they are there. Absolutely 100%. I know they're there. But when is the last time a doctor asked you the question before he gave you the advice? For example, your lipids are a little bit elevated. Hey, tell me what just like a regular day looks like for you. Tell me a little bit about the history of your eating. Is the question come before the advice? So, for example, again, that idea of teaching elementary school kid that a 300 calorie meal, right, is ridiculous. And there is a wrong assumption to begin with. So to say to kids, hey, tell me what a typical day looks like for you. What parts of the day do you love to eat? What's your favorite meal of the day? When does your family gather around the table? Do they gather around the table? How do you find much more important to encourage kids? Hey, if you guys aren't eating together, I wonder if you could ask your parents, could we eat it, at the table? That could be a fun adventure to do together. These are the things. So it's like, does a doctor ask a question before he gives advice? Is there a a understanding of what's happening. And that's true for dietitians. I mean, we can give advice based on disease state without even having an understanding of economics. What are the economics at home? What's the food access? Right? What do people have access to? What's their cultural history? We could take away foods that are like common for whatever their family, but we can say, oh, that's not healthy. We're not going to eat that. Healthy for who? Right? Their family line has been eating that for generations and they live to 95.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, what an assumption. What an assumption.
It's like the Blue Zone documentary. I don't know if you saw that, but you know, the place in Central America, which I can never remember which country it is in Central America where the Blue Zone is. They live on corn, squash, and beans, I think were the three staples. And I just couldn't get over this reality that like, I feel shamed if I don't have something green every day. Right. And corn, oh goodness, you know about corn, right, Amy?
Yeah.
Like corn, no corn. Right. Like, and so it's like, but they live to 100. And then there's my grandfather who died at, I think he was 98. That man had Wonder Bread and chocolate milk every day for the, 40 or so years that I was alive during his life. Now of course, like food quality was different. I know all of the things, but those yoo-hoos that he was drinking every day, I'm like, natural causes. Right. Like he did have he had some health issues for sure, but he didn't, it's fascinating that we are so afraid. And then I think the other part of that is, Amy, maybe you can kind of speak to this. I'm afraid of the food, and you alluded to this earlier, but I'm just really afraid of doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And if I don't have a plan, isn't it all my fault? Didn't I cause this? Didn't I I had gestational diabetes. And so I have a strong family history of diabetes.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone, like my people die of diabetes, not cancer. I mean, well, they don't really die of it, but that's what's going on at the end of life.
Yeah.
And it, and I doing the gestational diabetes thing, is a scary thing, right? Because you're taking your blood sugar all the time. Like it's a scary thing for someone with an eating disorder, I think, because it hyper fixates you on food and what it does to your body. And so I think as I think about my fear going into that blood work, like it's the big D word. It's, have I crept into the pre-diabetes range? And what does that mean? And did I cause that? Because I knew better, right? And then pragmatically, I do understand that diabetes isn't just about like eating sugar and really don't have the fear. It's so strange, Amy. This is a total aside. This is like Heather's therapy time here. But when I was disordered, right, the way my eating looked was, well, try not to eat until like 11:30, have my super healthy smoothie, right, with collagen and spinach and all the things, right? And then try not to eat, and then eat like a lot of handfuls of chocolate things or whatever I could get my hand on because I was so like ravenously hungry, and then eat like super healthy dinner, gluten-free, dairy-free, all the things, right? But then again, irrationally like hungry in the evening, and so handfuls of chocolate things. And then, the dilemma of don't buy the chocolate things anymore. And then you won't eat handfuls of chocolate things, but then eating handfuls of all the other things because they weren't chocolate things. And then, like maybe I can find some chocolate things in the kids' room, or like I can pick them out of the trail mix or something. I don't like desperation for the chocolate things. Right. And so it's strange because I feel like in my disordered life, I think I actually consumed more sugar and stuff that wasn't as good for me. And yet I'm more afraid now because I'm not on a plan, because I'm not constantly fearful of food, because I'm not thinking about food like that anymore. Right. And I know part of that's just eating disorder, like brain.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But I don't know. That was just a lot I just bled. But
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. Obviously it's the scarcity mindset, which you've talked about many times on here. And often our just the idea of being on a plan gives us a feeling of safety and that we're doing something, right?
Mm.
And again, we just sort of laid out a little bit of the framework of why we've been taught from a very early age that you need to know what you're doing. Like you need to know what you're doing. And let me just say, Ellen Satter, who's, got a brilliant model of, right, just division of responsibility and natural, kids with a wide variety of food will naturally gravitate towards a wide variety of food and a really moderate amount, right? So we're taking them away from that. That's what PE teachers need to learn, right? That model. But what we're doing is we're teaching that idea, that concept. So even if I'm eating more of the thing I don't want to eat, but I'm on that plan, I have the feeling of, for example, being on a prescription. Like at least I've got this prescription that's helping me with this thing I'm afraid of. So, but now without a quote unquote prescription, my inclination is that I'm always making the wrong choice because I don't have this thing I'm following to make the right choice. Now, I know that kind of felt like a maze that I just went down, but I think that you totally were tracking me.
Yeah, it was.
In other words, my connection is, well, I have this plan because I've told you, bajillions of clients have come into my office. That's a real number. That their first thing is, so you're going to give me a plan, right? And, I'll gently say, well, not exactly. No, we're going to just kind of look at where you are today. And we're going to kind of see, hey, let's talk about his, and they're just like, whoa, wait. And my favorite was the one that, used a curse word and said, blank, you're not going to give me the meal plan. And I was like, I can see why, right? And all the time. And meal planning is different than a meal plan, right? You and I've talked about that. Like being able to, I have to make a list. I make a grocery list. I say, hey, what do I already have in the freezer? What sounds good this week? I open a cookbook. I look at things. Gosh, I've been gravitating to the same, recipes, and that's meal planning. That's not the same as having a meal plan per se or a prescriptive meal plan. But that's just using our wisdom and using our like everyday resources to make sure that when it's 5 o'clock, I know what I'm making for dinner, or my husband's going to grill. Or so that one of the things that we do so often is to say, well, I can't, in order to, if I'm going to let go of it all, and it's like, yeah, it's okay. But we would work with, hey, this is all part of sort of normal eating, that you lost your trust, and we're going to work those things back in. So the idea of being on a prescriptive meal plan gives me a false sense of security for sure, because I will tell you, and I've told you this story before. So I used to, when I first started practicing, I had gestational diabetes patients. I had a full day of gestational diabetes patients. So I had to go into Houston Medical Center, which was where I practiced, but I had one day in this huge tower, just funnel in high risk pregnancy, all the things. Teaching was so triggering for my eating disorder. Teaching gestational diabetes patients, I would go home ruminating on numbers and carb counting and all of those things. And I would think, I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. Like just teaching the principles was triggering for my eating disorder. Yeah. And I had so much compassion, not really making the connection then that what if these women also had an eating disorder? I was so young, I was just ruminating on the numbers myself. But what I found was, which is true for me, I had a doctor hand me a gestational diabetes meal plan because I was having headaches. And he said, I just want you to eat like this. Okay, no rhyme or reason, right? Just, I want you to eat like this because I was having headaches. And I went home and binged on Oreo cookies, right? I mean, that was the here's your prescription.
Yeah.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
So I put it in the trash and was like, no, I'm eating normal. This is nothing to do. Like,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me just say, I would never make fun of, mock, say, how could that be anyone who feels afraid of food? When you said people feel afraid, there's a lot of reasons why they do. And I have a lot of empathy for that.
Yeah.
I don't think, well, that's silly. You shouldn't feel afraid of food. I don't feel that at all. I feel so much compassion and a place of saying, let's just meet you where you are. Write out the things that make you feel afraid. What is it that you think that you're doing wrong? Who told you that? I've asked a client recently to just ask that one question when she has a thought. Who told me that? And oh my goodness, she's been coming back with the most interesting, right? Who told you that? Who told you that?
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Amy, as we close up, I want to ask you the $1 million question for the day that it is, because the second part of this episode is coming out on November 1st.
Okay.
So the morning after Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I know, we don't have to get into the celebration or non-celebration of Halloween. Like there's obviously issues there. But no matter whether you do the trick-or-treating thing or the fall festival or the trunk or treat, there's a good chance that candy has found its way into your home if it's November 1st and you have children of a certain age.
Yes.
What do we do with the candy?
Yeah. Well, that actually is a little bit nuanced in that if somebody, right, depending upon where somebody was in their journey, I would probably give them different advice.
Yeah.
Honestly. And I say that because there isn't a one size fits all for this, but I've told this story before. Many of us, when our kids were little, or if your kids are little now, the idea of we kind of make a plan in our head. I'm not going to have any, and I'm going to throw it away on day 3 of my kids having it or whatever.
Sell it back to the dentist.
Sell it back to
that
the
one
dentist.
year.
That's making a little bit of loot. We always gave ours to like the military, like they would send it to military.
Okay.
Like there was a donation, I think, at school. But one is normalizing it for our children. I mean, it's not normal to have tons and tons of bags of candy in our house. That's actually not normal. Like to be like, normalize that there is 5 pounds of candy in our house. It isn't normal to have 5 pounds
because
of candy
when you have 4 children, that is how much you have.
It is how much you have. Yes. I mean, you think I'm going to get rid of my candy because I'm giving it away. And then you forget, oh my goodness, my children came back with 5 times as much. So when people say just normalize it, it's like, well, it's not normal, right? We don't normally have that much candy. And it's one of the things that I do though, is I try to tell people, look at that bag of candy and say, hey, I always say to the kiddos, hey, I am going to have your banana Laffy Taffy. So just get used to that. And I'm probably your dad's going to have your Reese's peanut butter cups. And we had a nut allergy. So that was good. We could take those out. But eating candy as a family and sitting down and talking and sitting and playing a game and having some candy and just normalizing and what's your favorite candy and why do you like that? And normalizing that is a very helpful experience, and eating it in the light of day. So if somebody is struggling with the overwhelming feelings of the candy, you don't, as part of your journey, it's not like I have to have all of this candy out for the next 5 weeks until it's gone. I don't think that's a realistic thing for anyone, but choosing to have some of that candy in a way that is really just normalizing and just fun as a family. We definitely have. In fact, I would just pull it out when my kids got home from school, for several days after, and pretty soon they would just stop asking for it. They didn't want it anymore. I would serve it with apples and peanut butter, and I would make chocolate chip cookies and even serve. And often it was like, oh, that was way more fun the first night.
Yeah. And
again, not because they just were like, I'm done with it.
Right.
I don't really want it. So one is that many people have a history that's a little bit triggering for them around that. And it's okay to take it slow and to ask advice if you're working with somebody, hey, how can I work back into this slowly? But my encouragement to you is, if you are like, I'm not going to have any Reese's peanut butter cup, I would take that Reese's and I would sit at the table and put it on a plate and sit in front of everyone and just eat that Reese's and just, what does it taste like? Most of the time when we taste candy slowly, we recognize not as big a fan as I thought I was.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. And the eating it in the light of day. Because
I
I think that's the game, right? I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it. Okay. Everyone's gone. It's dark. I'm going to eat it. I'm going to eat all of them.
Yes. Right? Yes. Eat it with the family, play a game of cards and have the candy on the table. I would just eat it on
Yeah.
the light of day. Yeah,
That's good.
for sure.
That's good. Thanks, Amy. Thanks so much for being here and
For
all your
having me.
wisdom.
I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so grateful for the conversations you have.
And you still have the Peace with Food app, right? That's still available for
Yes.
download. So we'll
Yes.
put a link to that in the show notes if anyone wants to
Mhm.
check that out. But thanks again, Amy.
Awesome.
I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
And
Okay.
thank you for watching or listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye-bye. Are you looking for real body image freedom? Hey, grab a copy of my book, The 40-Day Body Image Workbook, and plan right now to join us for the 40-day journey. Friend, it's only $49 for 6 weeks of group coaching. You can't do better than that. This is the way to start your freedom journey. I've got 100 spots available only, so sign up today, improvebodyimage.com.